Intrapreneurship is a concept that was developed some time ago to talk about what, it's kind of a name given to the idea that even if you're not launching your own venture, but you're inside of an organization, you can do intrapreneurship. You can be innovative within your organization. You might start a division or a product line, or you might have opportunities to innovate a new process or something within an existing organization. And a lot of organizations are looking for entrepreneurship skills to be an intrapreneur within their organization. And I've had lots of experiences doing that during the years that I worked a more traditional job. And then my family owned a business, and so I'll talk mostly about that because that's what you're here to hear about. And then I'm going to talk about something called extrapreneurship, which is a word I made up, except I found that lots of other people have made that up too when I Googled it, just to make sure it wasn't something bad. But in my mind, extrapreneurship is something that you do beyond being an entrepreneur, to take those skills and sort of give back to other people who are trying to start a business, or to get involved in the community, or other things that will help entrepreneurs in the entrepreneurial community thrive and grow. So I'm going to talk about some of my experiences in extrapreneurship. Okay, so have we decided that this works or doesn't work? And which way is? Okay. So one of my very first experiences in intrapreneurship was years and years and years ago when I worked as a florist for this company, King Soopers Floral. It's in Denver. Who knows King Soopers Florals? Anyone here? Okay, or King Soopers stores. There's about 65 stores, and I worked there from the time I was 20, I think, until I was about 25. Running a floral shop there, because that was my first skill set. When I left high school, I went to floral design school, and then I started working in different floral shops, and this is one that I ended up in, running one of their chain stores. And my entrepreneurial experience was this. They were a union company, and so at one point while I was there, the company went on strike, and I happened to work for non-union stores that were outside of Denver. So we were non-union, but all the Denver area stores went on strike. And this happened right before Mother's Day. Now, if you know anything about the floral business, you know Mother's Day is the biggest holiday of the year, except maybe Valentine's Day. Those are really close rivals. Most people have a sweetheart. Everyone has a mother, right? So it's technically bigger. So here we are, and all of the floral managers for all of these stores are going out on strike. I think that of the 65, roughly, stores at the time, about 45 of them were going on strike. And so the director of the floral for the whole company called me up because I was in a non-union store, and because I had shown some initiative. So that's really important. I had shown some initiative, some interest in doing more than what I was doing at the time and having broader opportunities. And she said, we've got a problem. We're going to lose about 20% of our store floral shop managers the week before Mother's Day because they're going out on strike. And I am completely swamped with just trying to get things, get things ordered and everything on a company-wide basis. She had a huge job. So I need you to come up with a plan. And because my store was not going out on strike, the women that worked under me, I had 2 or 3 women that worked under me, they took over my job, and I went up to the corporate office to help them solve this problem. And it was a huge problem. And what we did was, within about a week's time, we put together a design center that was a central location. One of our vendors had some spare warehouse space. We set up tables. We set up a temporary cooler. We set up an entire delivery system to deliver throughout the Denver metropolitan area. We brought in all these temporary workers and trained them how to do floral design on a really basic basis. So they would green containers, they would clean flowers, and then the few of us that had the skills to do it would just mass produce an assembly line, all these things as fast as we could. That was a tremendous intrapreneurial experience for me. I was within a huge corporation, but it was an opportunity for me to innovate something. And that design center did several $1 million of business in the month and a half that it was open, just because of the sheer volume that we were dealing with and figuring out how to solve that problem for the company. It also gave me a lot of exposure. After that, I had great opportunities to do things like decorate the Phipps Mansion for Christmas, do the what do you call it, Festival of Trees, and go to fundraisers with the company president and some of the vice presidents because they knew who I was and I had solved this problem. And so it was a tremendous experience. When you leave the university, most of you will probably leave to some sort of a corporate job. Some of you will become entrepreneurs right out of college, or maybe you've already started a business in college. But a lot of you will go to a corporation. Something like 40% of all great business ideas, if you were to survey the Inc. 500, that 40% of those great business ideas came from working in an industry, seeing a need, and figuring out a way to fill that need because you're in a perfect position. You've got industry contacts, you've got the know-how, you understand how the processes work within industry. So don't underestimate the value of getting a job in a regular corporation, finding ways to exercise intrapreneurship, get noticed, see things that need to be developed or improved upon, and make a business that way. Great way to not only find business ideas, but learn business processes and how businesses work on a large scale. So that was a great opportunity for me. I came back to college after that because I didn't have a college education. And while I was a student, I had this entrepreneurial bug because that was such a fantastic project. And I learned that I had skills and depth and courage that I didn't know I had. So I decided to launch a laser tag. This was in 1990. There was no such thing here. I had seen something like that in Denver. And I decided to launch a laser tag. This was a little entrepreneurial adventure. It was an epic fail, to use words that my kids use. It was an epic fail. I learned a lot about warranties. There was no way to buy commercial laser tag equipment at the time. And so I went to a company that had a laser tag. And at the time, it was kind of Frankenstein equipment, right? You cobbled together some light stuff and some light sensors, and you glued it, and you screwed it, and you did some stuff, and you came up with equipment. And so I ordered all the equipment from a company that was a working laser tag arena in Denver. And he gave me a warranty, which I felt really good about. So about a week into my business, I had a spot at Plumtree Shopping Center, right where Cafe Rio is now. That was my location. And so I'd gone through the whole commercial lease thing. I'd gone through the whole equipment thing. I had marketed it. I opened my doors. And within a week, all of the equipment was just junk. It didn't work. By the time people had banged it around in a commercial setting and run and hid and run into walls and whatever people do playing laser tag, none of my equipment worked. And so I went to my contract and I had the warranty, and the guy said, no problem. Just put it in a box and send it to me, and when I get around to it, I'll fix it. Well, that's not going to work, obviously. I couldn't wait for whenever he was going to get around to it. And so within a month, I was closed. After all that work, all that money, all that effort, it was a really super fun thing, and it would have been a great thing. But lessons learned. Whoops, going the wrong way. And then I started another little business because I thought I need to do something that I'm a little bit more familiar with. Went back to floral design, started a little floral shop in the Barbizon building. It was kind of like a Quilted Bear concept where you could have little booths, only there were a lot bigger booths and a lot fewer of them for craft displays. And it wasn't super lucrative, and the Barbizon building closed that business about 6 months after I started. So again, I relied on somebody else, and it was up to them to close. Once they closed, I was closed, and that was the end of that. So I decided I really needed to go a more traditional route. I'd had my little bout of entrepreneurship. It hadn't gone so well. It had been okay. I supported myself through law school with doing floral design and floral type businesses. But I went to law school, and after that, I got a job at New Skin. You recognize the New Skin building, right? Are you guys, can you see the slides okay? Should we turn off some lights? What's your preference? Okay, so got a job at New Skin, had another great entrepreneurial experience. I had the opportunity to help the new market development team open operations in Brazil, look at marketing for operations in other South American countries. I was involved in opening operations in Europe. And again, you know, it's that opportunity to really dig deep, to fix problems, figure out problems, solve the things that are different between the U.S. type of operation and a foreign country operation. That was a great experience. And one of the things that I did for them as well was an intellectual property attorney. So that's where I got to learn a lot about trademarks and copyrights and marketing from the legal standpoint. But one of the things that was a little unfulfilling to me at that time, By this time, it was about 2000, 2001, and I wasn't having any opportunity to learn one of the key pieces of intellectual property is licensing and licensing technology. Nu Skin was kind of a lotions and potions company, right? So they didn't have any technology. They would probably disagree with that, but not hardcore software. And I wanted to learn how to license software, and so I went to a little company called Altiris. And Altiris did software, and I did the software licensing for them for a few years. So I had an opportunity overall to do about 10 years of corporate legal practice. And when I graduated from law school, that was one of my real desires, was that law school is a very theoretical type of experience, type of learning environment. It's not very practical, and my brain works more practically. And so I knew that I wanted to practice law for at least a couple of years after law school to solidify those principles that I had learned and really feel like I had a marketable career. And so one thing that I found out about the practice of law and the corporate environment is it's pretty inflexible, and it kind of takes over your life. And if you're someone who has an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, like I did, because I was an oldest child and now I was a lawyer and I felt really responsible for my clients and everything, I had a hard time at the end of the day going home. I had a hard time feeling like I was done, and I just felt like it was taking over my life. By this time at Altiris, I had 3 children. So I had my first child. Actually, that's an interesting story. I had my first son the day after I took the bar exam after law school. So I had 2 days of bar exam, 8 hours each day, stayed up, of course, the night before, and then took the exam, stayed up the next night because I was still panicked about the other half of the exam, took the exam, went into labor on my way home, delivered my first baby the next morning, and there I was. I was a mom and an attorney all at the same time. How did I not see this coming? I had 9 months, right, to imagine what my life was going to be like when the baby came, and suddenly, wham, there I am going, how am I going to juggle this? Then I had 2 more children. I had one before my daughter, my second, before I left Nu Skin, and then my son when I was at Altiris. And it just was too much. It was too much. I couldn't do all those things. And you'll have speakers stand up here and say, women can have it all, you just need to be organized. But I'm here to testify there are limits to that. And I was pretty capable, right? I took the bar exam and had a baby the next day. I was pretty capable, but there's just too much. There comes a point where it's too much, and I was at the too much point. So here's where entrepreneurship comes back. Oh, whoops. Let me just skip ahead one, and then I'll skip back. This was a business that we ran for 9 years. My husband started it. We started it together, but he was the face of the business because he was a Canadian. And you can see the business is called the Crazy Canuck, and it had the Canadian flag. And does anyone in here remember that business? We closed it in 2009, so there's just be a few of you that do. He had come here to BYU as a Canadian student, found that he could not find the things that he liked here as far as Canadian goods, chocolate bars and potato chips with the weird flavors like Canadians have, ketchup and dill pickle and all that you've heard of. And he was a serious hockey player, and there was a little hockey pro shop up in Orem that was in the process of going out of business, and so he just felt like he had done some other businesses and felt like this was one that he'd always kind of talked about but never really done. And finally I said, let's do this. If you want to run a business, then do the thing that's close to your heart. And so we started this business in 2001. And it was really great timing because the Olympics in early 2002 were all about Canadian, right? The Salt Lake Olympics, you'll remember that both the women's and men's hockey teams took gold from Canada. Remember the big figure skating controversy about the only time, I think, in Olympic history that they reversed the judge's decision and awarded 2 gold medals, and one was to the Canadian team. And there just was a lot of Canadian patriotism riding high in early 2002. So this, whoops, backing up, was going the wrong way. Why is it the same both ways? There we go. This was our first location. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about this. This was, you can see kind of how sparse it is because it was a retail store, and we had brought in, we got all the ketchup chips, we got the ketchup and the dill pickle and all the brands of Old Dutch chips. We got a few flags on the wall. But one really tough thing happened when we opened our store. Because it was the Olympics and because it was right after 9/11, only a few months later. There was a big concern at the time. How many of you were here in 2002, lived here or came to the Olympics? Okay, so a lot of you are from other places. Security became a big concern because the concern was terrorist threat, and here's the next big, U.S. is the host, and so terrorism was a big concern. One of the really difficult things for us was we were an import store, and we couldn't import much of anything from Canada because, first of all, Customs and Border Patrol were really monitoring for anything dangerous, anything terrorist-oriented. And so the only things that were getting across the border were what the Olympic teams needed to compete. And so anything of ours coming through the border was slated for last. So we got to the Olympics. We had all kinds of Canadians. We had a Canadian morning show like Good Morning America or the Today Show that called in and interviewed us. We had all kinds of great press because here we were right in the Olympic location, and we were a Canadian store. But we couldn't get product, and we started running out of everything. I mean, we were just ransacked. And so here's one of the points that I want to make about entrepreneurship. Sometimes you do whatever you have to do to make your business work. You take a look at what you've got, and you make the most out of it. And so I started to bring, I had this huge teddy bear I started to bring, and then I thought I'd feel really stupid walking across campus. It was a huge teddy bear, so I didn't bring it. We were out of all the Canadian stuff that we had imported. We started printing T-shirts with Canadian flags on them as quickly as we can. We went up to, there's a big flag store off of I-15 in Salt Lake, bought all the Canadian flags we could get our hands on and brought them down to our store. We had these big white teddy bears, and Sears or Penny's had clearanced them out. They were big white teddy bears, and on one paw they had snowflakes, and on the other paw they had the year 2001. And so Sears or Penny's had them clearance. They were white polar bears, clearanced out for like $2 a piece. We bought the entire thing, shaved the little 2001 off their foot, glued a Canadian flag on. We could not keep those in stock. I mean, those were hot items. And so we went to the dollar stores, and we bought every hockey sticker we could find, every hockey trading card we could find to put inventory in our store, because even though we weren't going to make a lot of money, we made a lot of money on the bears, actually, because they were so cheap. We wanted people to know that we were there to stay. We weren't just an Olympic phenomenon. We were going to be there, and we wanted people, when they came in, to see that we had product, that we had merchandise, and that we were going to be there long term. And we really got decimated. This was a little hole in the wall on Center Street. I loved the brick and the wood floors. It was kind of sad to leave, but it wasn't very big. And so we immediately moved to this location on the corner of First North and University Avenue, and we were there for about 5 years. It's now the Communal, so if you know where the Communal is, that used to be the Crazy Canuck. And so here's just a couple shots of, we were pretty packed in there too. By this time we had taken on hockey equipment and Canadian imported foods. Let's see if I have a picture. There's more hockey equipment. There's some Canadian brands. They're different than our brands, as it turns out, and people will pay a lot of money for them to get them down here, not have to go back home. Our second location was in the East Center, now the Maverick Center, and we learned a couple of things about that. One is, make sure that you know where your market is and what your reach is. We figured we had, reached most of the Canadians in Provo knew about us, but we knew that there were Canadians, many, many more in Salt Lake, in Ogden and North, and we thought a second location at the East Center would be fantastic. Two things that we learned, well, maybe three things that we learned about this. But number one is, know where your reach is. It turned out we were reaching Canadians way farther away than we thought. And so when we opened at the East Center, it started cannibalizing our business down here. Do you know what I mean by that? Cannibalizing meaning we were losing business here because the people who used to come all the way down were just now only coming to the East Center. So people from northern Utah and other places, or people that were flying into Salt Lake instead of making the trip down, would just go to the East Center. So if you're going to double your expense by doubling your location, make sure you have double the number of customers or more, right, to make up for it. Because otherwise you're just putting more costs for the same amount of dollars. What we were learning is that a lot of sports teams, a lot of hockey teams, would just wait to make their purchases until they played the Provo team. Then after the Provo game, they'd come into the Crazy Canuck and load up on ketchup chips and other things, and whatever hockey tape, whatever Canadians do, I don't know. And, and so we didn't get as many extra sales as we thought we would from the East Center location because we were already penetrating that market pretty well. Hockey players and Canadians and lacrosse players. So I'll back up. You can see, oh yeah, okay. All right, so there's a couple pictures of them. Those are kind of dark. They're hard to see. Sorry about that. Okay, this was our third location. It was in the Provo Town Center Mall. And we moved it towards the end from our University Mall location, University Avenue location, Provo Town Center Mall. And that was tough. There were a lot of things about that change that really cost us and made it hard to keep the business going. After this location, we closed the business in 2009. So we ran it from the beginning of 2001 till the end of 2009. We got in a dispute about our lease with our University Avenue location. I would have liked to stay there. My husband wanted to find a bigger location at that point. We ended up in a smaller location. But we got in a dispute with the landlord and decided it wasn't worth duking it out. We were just going to go to a new location. But the timing wasn't really that great for us. Number one, the hockey community here was going through some really difficult problems. And so maybe here's another lesson learned, is that there are factors beyond your control. And one of the factors beyond our control was a dispute between the city and the management at the rink at Peaks Arena at the time. And the city was trying to get that management out, and that management was trying to go as long without making payments because it was more expensive than they thought to run it. So they'd wait until the city was about ready to evict them, and then they'd make a payment. So it went on for several years, and there was a lot of acrimony in the hockey community as a result. And people started taking their kids, rather than playing at Peaks, until that was resolved, taking their kids to play in Salt Lake. And so, again, some of our business from here started going up there, and it became difficult. At the same time, in 2008, remember what happened financially in our country? We had a lot of difficulties in 2008. And one of the things that we learned right after we signed the lease on this space in the mall was that the mall filed bankruptcy. So another lesson learned was that if you're going to be in a mall, or if you're going to pay that high rent to be in a mall, you either have to have good anchors in that mall that draw the people in, or you have to be a destination business. Fortunately for us and the mall, we were a destination business. People would come find us. If they needed their skates sharpened, if they just had to have some ketchup chips, whatever it was, people would come find us. So we were a destination, and that was okay. But if you're paying those premium prices, you want to make sure the traffic flow is there. And during that time, 2008, 2009, at the Provo Town Center Mall, the traffic flow was really abysmal because they were doing nothing as a mall to bring people in. And there was a lot of vacancies in the mall. So it was great right when we went in, and right after we had been in for a few months, we learned about the bankruptcy that the mall was in. Nobody, of course, was signing leases. People, when their space came up for rent, would vacate. And it was really kind of a dead time to be at the mall. So we had the problem with the local community. We had the problem with the mall. And we had the general problem in the economy. And so we were fortunate in that we signed a one-year lease instead of a three-year lease at the mall. And at the end of that year, we decided to take our business online rather than renew, because at that point we had an option of a three-year lease or move. And we just made one move and lost some customers because they didn't know we moved to the mall. The economy wasn't good. And so at that point we thought, you know what, this is a good time to close this business. We didn't want to. We had it was a real passion for us, more than a moneymaker in a lot of ways. And that's the life of retail. Retail businesses are really tough. So if I was going to open another business, retail wouldn't be my choice. Retail is really tough for hours, for having to have lots of merchandise. It's tough to bootstrap a retail location. We did that. We were able to do that because I was working. So I stopped working in 2005. We opened the business in 2001. So we had 3 or 4 years to bootstrap that business, buy our inventory as much as we could with our own personal funds and cash so that we weren't in heaps of debt. But retail is tough for a lot of reasons. Things are seasonal. People want the latest lacrosse head, not the one that you have on clearance, except maybe here in Provo, because lots of kids and they're expensive sports. So that's, I think, most of the things about our business. Now this stopped working. Okay, so question, do you want, let's do, I can't see the clock. Is it? I don't want to go too late. Okay, 2 after 4, so we have plenty of time. So I'm gonna talk next about extrapreneurship, but do you have any questions about my business?
So it's online?
It was online for about a year after that, but it turns out it's tough to teach an old dog new tricks. And at that point, my husband was just an old dog. He was not learning the online stuff very well, and he had a tendency to trust web developers and things that vaporized after they got his money. So we had the store online for about a year, and at this point it's completely closed, except for our friends who still come to my house sometimes and buy stuff out of my attic, like hockey equipment. But yeah, it's closed. We closed it really officially in very end of 2009. It was online until sometime in maybe early 2011, and then we were finally done. Okay, no questions about that? Okay, some lessons learned from that. One of the lessons that we learned was, I've given you a bunch, but I'll give you a few more. Know your target market. I talked about the problem of cannibalizing our Provo sales with our eCenter store sales. Another thing that we learned the hard way was how to market to this group. Really, the best way to market was word of mouth through the hockey community and the Canadian community. If any of you know a Canadian, how many know a Canadian? You all know a Canadian, right? When you met them, how many sentences into the conversation was it before they told you they were Canadian? I've kind of spotted a trend. I don't want to generalize, but Canadians are very patriotic, and they're also very well linked. The network of LDS Canadians, everybody knows everybody. So it really didn't, paying for advertisements didn't get us very much farther. We did a pretty expensive advertising campaign through Cumulus Media and through radio, 2 or 3 radio stations in the area. We didn't, we spent a lot of money that could have been well spent other ways and didn't get much out of that because the people who would have known about us already knew about us. We got some, but we didn't get a lot. Our best advertising is in the programs for high school hockey, BYU hockey, getting involved in the local community, being involved in the nonprofit organizations like the leagues that support hockey. Same with lacrosse. I haven't mentioned lacrosse as much. My kids all play hockey. Lacrosse was kind of not second nature, but it made sense. Another thing that we learned is it's really great to look at your product mix and consider how to smooth out the peaks and valleys in business. Well, let me explain that a little bit. We adopted a couple of product lines that had reciprocal seasons. So when hockey's hot, lacrosse is on a break. When lacrosse is hot, hockey's over. And then the summer is just dead time except for camps. And if you can really tie into the camps, then you've got, you even out those peaks and valleys and you have a more steady cash flow through the year. So look at whatever you're selling. Look at your peaks and valleys in your business. And whether it's product or service, every business has cycles, right? What kind of complementary products can you offer that same demographic might take you up on that has different seasons than the one you're currently having? That helped our business a lot. I think that's one of the reasons why we had the longevity that we did. I don't know what the shelf life is of a retail store in Provo, Utah, of the mom and pop variety, but I think 9 years is a pretty long run. One thing we saw a lot that shocked me, but as we talked to other business owners, we're having the same experience as people come in and not be willing to pay the price on the sticker and really ask, is this the best price you can do? Can't you give me a discount? Can't you give me a deal? We were already almost competitive with the internet. And it was really tough when people would ask us for a bigger discount than what was there or what sale we were having. And I was surprised by how often that happened. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about extrapreneurship, some of the things that I've done since. Being an entrepreneur, it's really interesting what happens when you have the courage to hang out your shingle and say, this is what I do, this is my business, this is what I stand for, or whatever. It wasn't so much my passion, it was my husband's passion because he was the Canadian. But a family business just brings everybody in. He was the face of the business, and I was sort of the back end of the business because I was the one negotiating the contracts or figuring out how to do payroll or figuring out how to pay a vendor or fundraising or whatever it was, dealing with the accountants, all that. But he was the day-to-day guy behind the desk, and he knew all the Canadians, and so that worked really well. But when you hang your shingle out and you say, this is who I am and this is what I do, you get connected to other entrepreneurs in the community. And you get lots of opportunities that come from having run a business. And one of the great opportunities that came for me was an opportunity to teach here at the Marriott School of Management. And it's something I really love. So there's a picture of Marriott School. And here's a couple of student teams. I've mentored, I probably mentor about between 12 and 20 businesses a semester of student-run businesses. Part of that is because most semesters I teach a class where there's maybe 6 or 7 student teams that are starting a business. And so these are pictures of those. This group right here, this was a fun business. They decided that they were going to buy cars, fix them up, and sell them. Now, if that's not a risky business, I don't know what is. And I tried and tried to tell them, this is not what you want to do. You know, one lemon, you guys invest in one lemon and you're done. But they found a great little car. They had a friend who was a mechanic. They bought it cheap from, I think it was Utah State. At the end of a semester, a student was leaving and had posted on the bulletin board. One of them had been up there and saw it. They bought it, painted it, took the cheap paint job for a couple $100s, took it to a mechanic, made sure it worked, and sold it for twice as much money. And there they are holding the cash that they made that semester. The class that I teach is Business Management 372, and I don't teach it winter term, but the idea is that you form a group, start a business during the semester, and you have to do, I think it's $2,000 worth of sales, $1,500 or $2,000 depending on the semester, of sales in the business in order to get a good grade in the class. And so they were motivated to make their money, and they did. This business has been profiled a couple times in Alumni Magazine and other things. It was a student that started a card business. The card business was a card game was called Circle Out. And during the course of the class, one of the things we had to do was test market the game. So we canceled class one day and we just sat and played cards. But the point of that was we wanted to make sure he needed help figuring out all of the loopholes in the game so that he could make rules around it. He had the general game idea, and his team helped to create the game and market the game, but we needed to write the rules, and so we canceled class one day. We sat and played cards. We broke into teams, and everyone would play around and then note things that they learned about the card game or maybe little loopholes that they saw so that he could write rules around it. And that was a great experience. I've done a number of different business plan competitions, home-based business plan competitions, so I'm usually mentoring some students around that. And so it's been a great opportunity for me to see different types of businesses and give ideas and experiences from my business and help other people with their business. I think you'll find entrepreneurs get a little lonely because they're kind of in their own space, and some of them really like that. But also, you need to connect with other entrepreneurs in the community because you need the camaraderie that you don't have from maybe working in a corporate environment. So let's see, what else? A couple semesters ago, I started a business law class here, teaching not the basic accounting business law, but business law for entrepreneurs. And we talk a little bit more about marketing and truth in advertising and employment issues and intellectual property issues and things like that. So that's one of the things that I've been doing as an extrapreneur. Another thing that I got involved with was being on the Provo, that's a really blurry picture, sorry about that. The Provo Business Development Corporation is a corporation in Provo. It's formed by Provo City, but it operates independently. And it's got funding to help small businesses located in Provo. And the criteria is you've got to have a business that's going to go somewhere with the investment dollars, stable enough that you're going to pay them back, and that you can articulate how you can create jobs in Provo by starting businesses in Provo. One thing that you may not realize about small businesses is that depending on the way that you look at the statistics, small businesses create almost all net new jobs in the economy. Something like 60 or 70% of all jobs are created by small businesses. But as far as net new jobs where the job growth occurs, it's almost all in small businesses. So it's really important for cities like Provo to spur growth of entrepreneurial businesses. I got involved in a company called Franchise Foundry. Franchise Foundry will take a business concept and develop it into a franchise system. And I did a temporary stint in a consulting role as the CEO of iPreserve. Franchise Foundry bought that company kind of by default a little bit. They got that company, and then we sorted it all out and tried to decide if we could make it run or not, and ended up deciding to sell it to another company. But it's been a great opportunity for me to see other businesses, how they work, get involved in other things, and still be in touch with the entrepreneurial community. So I do quite a bit of consulting. Of course, I do legal work too for startup companies, serve as a general counsel or as a CEO for different companies. And I think that's the end of my slides. So questions about what my business has been like, what I'm doing now, what entrepreneurship is like. Yeah?
So how do you bounce back from a failed business? It seems like business fails and you kind of slump. How do you
It's a good question. It's a good question. And I suppose technically, the definition of a failed business is a business that closes at a loss to creditors. So when I look at our business that we ran for 9 years, we still owed some creditors when we closed. And we had to do workarounds or try and work things out with them or keep paying on or other things. So technically that was a failed business according to the textbook definition. But let me talk about that for a little bit, because lots of businesses fail according to that definition. But yet, what does a business accomplish when they're doing that? And I think that, for me, that was part of the rebound. I think that the business closing was harder on my husband because it was more connected to who he was as a person, his identity. But I looked back on how many sports teams did we sponsor? How many employees, how many college students did we employ? How many teams did we outfit? How many years did a landlord in downtown Provo or at the mall have rent? How many times did we need to see a lawyer because it was a problem I didn't want to handle? Or an accountant? How much does a small business stimulate the economy around it? And it's a huge amount. It's really a huge impact that you can make as a small business, whether or not ultimately I would have loved to have sold that business for $50 million to some company that said, that's a great franchising opportunity, we're going to do that. It was never that. It was never that kind of business. It was always sort of intended to be a small family business, and those don't tend to be lucrative. They tend to pay your bills until you close them, and that's kind of how that was. But I would say it's a little harder. I think it was harder for my husband because that was his day-to-day job than it was for me. But it's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to close a business because it's the logical thing to do. It's a very emotional thing because you become very attached to your identity and other things. So for me, extrapreneurship was that way. It was saying, what can I do? What have I learned? What can I teach? How can I get involved in the community? Yeah.
So you mentioned that you wouldn't do retail again, but would you do another business?
I have thought about another business. Thank you for asking. Would you like to know about my other business? Are there any other questions first? Because I do have a business idea that I'm going to just throw out there, and you guys can tell me if you think it's good or not. What do you think? Would that be fun? Okay. Other questions before we do that? Okay. I don't have a slide. So this is a business idea that I've been thinking about for a while. And I've actually thought about it enough to have filed a patent on it, to have done some intellectual property on it, and to have found some sources for the technology behind it. but I haven't launched it yet. And maybe I will sometime soon. The idea is a voice journal. So if I said voice journal, what would you think that meant? Record your voice. Okay. This is a voice journal for missionaries. Because I think missionaries, they're journalers, right? Most missionaries are journalers. When I was a kid and maybe a teenager, and my older friends had friends on missions, they would take a cassette recorder with them on their mission, and they would record tapes. And they would mail them home, and then the family would record on that tape and mail it back. And they were constantly going back and forth with recorded voice tapes. We don't do that anymore. And I think it's because the technology, who wants to carry a cassette recorder? And even if you do, where are you going to get a tape, right? So you could have an MP3 player, or you could use your camera maybe, or sometimes you can upload an audio file. But really the simple way is voicemail, isn't it? So wouldn't it be great if a missionary could grab any phone, dial an 800 number, and just leave a voicemail on a dead-end mailbox that could never be connected to a living person, like their family, because that's a no-no. So I think that would be a great idea, and that's something that I'm pursuing and analyzing. I'd like to see missionaries be able to call a voicemail box, leave their voice journal for the week, and then either have it transcribed, have it turned into a CD collection that they can have at the end of their mission, or make it accessible so their family can call that number and listen to the voicemail and hear their experiences almost in real time, and in their own voice. So I threw that out there. I'm getting a lot of blank stares. I don't know. Questions, thoughts about that? I've talked to a number of return missionaries, mission presidents, and said, what would you think if that was available to your missionaries? Because a lot of moms will say, oh, they're not allowed to use the phone. But they're just not allowed to call home. So mission presidents don't seem to have a problem with it.
On my mission, I brought a tape recorder, and I wouldn't, every day I wouldn't, but if something funny happened or something that I wanted to not forget, I would record it, and I would have my companions record their experiences, like spiritual, funny, and I had that, and I listened to it, and I listened to it, and I forgot about that, and so I'm so glad I did that, because there's so many things that I've recorded, and then I just don't think about anymore, but then I go back and listen to it, and I remember it, and it's always there.
It's amazing. If you'll notice this with songs, but if you have a favorite song that you hear it and it takes you right back to a place in your life, right back to a memory where you heard that song, it's amazing how sound can do that. And I think that's lost for a lot of missionaries, that write their experiences but don't record their experiences. So that's my idea. That's what I'm working on right now. I may launch it, I may not. We'll see. I set up a Facebook page. It's called Listen to the Mission. So if you just go to Facebook and search Listen to the Mission, there's nothing there but like a generic picture of a couple missionaries. If you like the idea, leave a comment. If you've got suggestions, or message me through that. I don't want negatives on there, because I don't know. I may use it and I may not. But if you like the idea, like it. Or if you have a comment, comment. Or if you have a criticism or a concern or a suggestion, message me. You got a question? Oh, okay. I just saw your hand up.
I have a comment though. That's good. I guess also because of if we're
Yeah. I think it has applications way broader than missionaries, but I think people who aren't on a mission have more options. But missionaries don't want to carry equipment with them. They don't have as many options, and they can't just call home. So I think that there's an added benefit that families, could hear their journal as they're going along, and I think that's kind of fun. So that's what I'm working on, and I'm just doing market research on it, so I'd like your feedback on it, and who knows, maybe at some point you'll see it out there.